I give the CIA a total credit for sponsoring and initiating the entire consciousness movement, counterculture events of the 1960s.
Welcome back to Rise to Liberty podcast. How is everyone doing this evening? It is Friday. Finally, it is Friday. So today we will have a little bit of fun. It's going to be kind of a little bit of a heavy topic, but we got to do what we got to do. First and foremost, a couple of announcements, things I would like to bring up real quick. One thing I want to do is let everyone know to go over to this show's sponsor. That is Nadeau Shave Co. NADEAUSHAVECO.com. Use promo code RISE15, get 15% off your order. They are an absolutely fantastic company, veteran-owned, family-operated. I mean, the days of Big Shave are over. No more China-made plastic crap that just tears up your skin. Go with a company that actually cares about their customers and make sure and let them know that we sent you there. A couple of other things just real quick. Let's see. So we do have an option for people that do want to financially support the show now. Let's see here. You can go over to Buy Me a Coffee and buy me a coffee. Help with all this research I've got to do, all of the content creation and everything. You can go over to risetoliberty.com/coffee and go buy me a coffee. You can make it a one-time donation, or you can make it reoccurring. Also, this has been a long time coming. We now have new merch. Go check out the new merch. Let's see here. Let's pull it up. We now have new t-shirts right here. Go check that out. You can go get the same design on a coffee mug. So go check that out. There's two different versions of the t-shirt. It's the same t-shirt, but different quality of the shirts themselves. So make sure and go check that out. And also, last thing before we get going into this, I just released a new article over on my Substack having to do with the same topic, Vietnam War veterans who became serial killers, side effects of war, or MKULTRA experiment gone right. So make sure and go check that out. So let's see here. Okay, other than that, I think we get into it as far as today's topic. So, for anyone who doesn't know, or anyone that couldn't guess by, the title, I have been deep diving into the Vietnam War. Not just the Vietnam War, but the Phoenix program specifically. So that is what we will be covering today. It is a real nasty project, real nasty program. So, not that I feel like I really have to say this, but trigger warning for anyone who has, any issues with hearing some graphic details. If you do, maybe this is not your episode. Maybe you just skip this. So that's pretty much all I'm going to say, but we are going to go into some details. This might also be kind of a long one. So with that being said, I say, let's get into it, shall we? So first we are going to start, we're actually going to start with fixing this so it actually looks better for you people. So give me just a sec to do that. Let's see here. Okay. Wow. Real professional. Okay, here we go. So we will be going through this article with all the research I've done without having written a script or something along these lines. This is the absolute best, in my opinion, regarding all the topics I'll want to cover, all the points we need to hit, plus having the most accurate information. So, of course, like everything, it starts much further back than the Vietnam War. This really starts with Operation Paperclip and the Faustian bargain that brought all of these guys over. So, for those who don't know, let's get into Operation Paperclip, which we will be covering definitely more in depth later on. Um, so, pictured, you can see a group of 104 German rocket scientists in 1946, including Werner von Braun, Ludwig Roth, and Arthur Rudolph at Fort Bliss, Texas. Wonderful little picture. So, when the Reich fell in 1945, the United States recognized the intellectual value of Nazi scientists, engineers, and doctors. To ensure post war advantages, they launched Operation Paperclip, a project to recruit former Nazis, offering them jobs and new identities in exchange for their expertise for the U.S. military and government. A notable figure from this program is Werner von Braun, who designed the Nazis' advanced V 2 rocket. His expertise in rocket technology and propulsion led him to head the National Air and Space Program, significantly contributing to the U.S. space program's success in landing on the moon. Let's we'll leave the moon for another day. But let's see. Without the intellectual contributions of these former enemies, the trajectory of the U.S. space program remains uncertain. I don't think it ever did. I think we would have ended up here no matter what, where we are. However, the integration of Nazi scientists into the U.S. government also brought grievances and cruelty that permeated the intelligence community. The Central Intelligence Agency, formed in 1947 amidst tensions with the Soviet Union, or so they say, adopted techniques rooted in Nazi ideology, particularly in psychological torture. These methods were propagated globally under the guise of relief and assistance programs. The most infamous example was the Phoenix program during the Vietnam conflict, which exemplified the dark legacy of these practices. So, the genesis of the Phoenix program has roots in counterinsurgency. The Phoenix program, established by the CIA in 1967, served as an intelligence network in Vietnam, unifying all counterinsurgency operations, including police, military intelligence, and other CIA activities. This consolidation allowed the CIA to efficiently gather and extract information from high-value targets. The program's strength lay in its adaptability, mirroring the flexibility of its adversaries. CIA agents and plainclothes officers collaborated closely regardless of differences in training and rank, which was, for the sake of the program, was actually pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? It was innovative for the time, as far as like military tactics go. This was not a very common thing for, people that didn't have the same type of training or that held the same rank. It wasn't normal for them to work amongst each other as if they did have the same rank. A significant component of the Phoenix program was the Office of Public Safety, or OPS, created in 1962 to train Allied police forces globally. It quickly became a crucial tool for disseminating CIA torture techniques and combating communism worldwide, or so they say. The OPS brought trainees from Latin America, Vietnam, and other countries to a secret training center in Washington, D.C., where U.S. officials instructed them in torture methods. In Vietnam, these trainees were subjected to stringent wartime measures aimed at defeating the enemy. In 1971, a South Vietnamese trainee exposed the controversial nature of these methods in his thesis. Now, this is a quote. The quote from this Vietnamese trainee, South Vietnamese trainee, this is what he said in his thesis. Despite the fact that brutal interrogation is strongly criticized by moralists, its importance must not be denied if we want to have order and security in daily life. I personally believe that it gives you kind of a window into the mindset of people who would be in support of something like this. This statement underscores the ethical dilemmas and harsh realities forced by those involved in the Phoenix program, highlighting the complex interplay between security and morality during wartime. Now, I am of a person who is incredibly anti-war. This is an anti-war channel. No matter what, I will always be and always have been anti-war. However, once you do start a war, morality and ethics kind of go out the window. Once that happens, once you look into a war, you are going to find so many things wrong with it. And the only answer from that, it's not how do we conduct warfare more ethically or more morally. It's just don't enter into conflict. Now, this is a discussion for another day, but I do believe that, there is such thing as justified conflict, a moral conflict, justified war theory. But that is a discussion for another day. However, I would argue probably 95, maybe even 99% of every conflict does not meet those standards, especially within modern times. So let's get into the operations and the controversies. So, brutal techniques and leadership. The Phoenix program crafted a sophisticated ladder of intelligence from rural Vietnam to the head intelligence office in Saigon. Also, I'm just going to say this right now. I do not speak Vietnamese. I'll attempt some things, I'm sure, but if I screw up on pronunciation, I mean, what can I say? I'm white, not Vietnamese. Largely due to the strategic version of Peter Da Silva, the CIA station chief in Saigon. Da Silva aimed to replicate the Viet Cong's brutal techniques in situating an equally harsh system. So one thing I do know about the Vietnamese is they have a culture of vendetta. And so that was one thing that made the Vietnam War, all of it, particularly brutal. South Vietnam and North Vietnam, they both, in their culture, the Vietnamese culture, there is a really strong tie to the idea of revenge. Where that starts, I'm not exactly sure. I'm not an expert, but that is one thing that made this particularly brutal. Let's see here. So local thugs under the guise of provincial reconnaissance units, PRUs, initiated systematic torture in getting all tongue-tied here. Provincial interrogation centers across each province. Geez, I can say that word. This approach was intended to break the enemy's will and gather critical information, but it also led to widespread human rights abuses. K. Barton Osborne, a military intelligence official with the Phoenix program in Vietnam from 1967 to 1968, described horrific procedures, including inserting a dowel into a captive's ear until it was hammered into their brain, and the sexual and electric exploitation of men and women prior to their death. Osborne testified that these procedures were outlined in the Defense Collection Intelligence Manual issued during training. His testimony revealed the systematic nature of the brutality and the extent to which these practices were institutionalized within the program. Let's see here. Of course, this happens every stream. There should have been, I should have had this pulled up, of course. Let's see. But, you know, this is what makes a live stream interesting sometimes. So I was going to bring up a video. Let's see here. Let's see here. Oh, come on. Okay. Now, I know I've watched this before. Okay, so we're not going to watch all of it. I will leave it in the episode description for anyone who is interested, though. So we are going to go check this out right now. Let's see here. Okay.
Torchlit ceremonies marked the end of training at Vung Tau camp. From here, the special teams went to operate in the countryside. Their war was heartless. Close-knit family structures and the Vietnamese tradition of retribution made murder, torture, and vendetta commonplace. Beating prisoners and brutal torture were an everyday feature of the war. The strength of family loyalties, the traditions of retribution, and the ruthlessness of the Vietnamese made this so. Gathering intelligence was often incidental. Brutality and assassination were time-honored ways of exacting revenge. It was part of Vietnam. It was part of Phoenix.
I'm an ex-CI colonel with blood up to my armpits. Not personally, I never killed myself, but I managed wars that killed a lot of people.
And this was one of them. For John Stockwell, as for many others, the system that generated torture was more powerful than any individual objections raised against it.
The CIA was tolerant of torture in Vietnam. It also participated in it on occasion in some of the interrogation centers as a matter of policy. Of course, as a matter of policy, it had to deny it. In my own experience, and when I moved to Tay Ninh, I found the police chief there was using our safe house to carve up prisoners who didn't have family protection. I reported it in a discreet memo to Tom Polgar, the chief of station, and his response was to have me down for a cocktail party and quietly in the garden, a nice man, explained to me that he couldn't close the post down, it was too important. He couldn't get the man transferred because that would be interfering in Vietnamese affairs. So all he could think to do would be to transfer me, and he pointed out that that would seriously damage my career. So I went back to Tay Ninh and closed the safe house down, put out the word to my staff that I vigorously disapproved of torture, and so no one mentioned it to me again for my 2 years in the country.
So let's see, we will get back to this because it does kind of, obviously it relates to it, but we're going to kind of, you know, move back and forth. So let's see here. Let's get back to the article. Also, I did find one operator's manual for anyone who is interested. It's a field manual. Of course, this is much newer than what they would have used in Vietnam. I will find the older Vietnam manual. However, this is, I believe, the current manual that they use for these types of interrogations. So Field Manual 2-22.3 or Field Manual 34-52, Human Intelligence Collector Operations. Feel free to go check that out. Anyone who's interested in that. Let's see here. So let's get back to the article. So this is definitely where we get more into the brutal nature of things. So once again, anyone who doesn't think that they can handle it, please feel free to skip this. So atrocities in Bin Hoa, I believe is how you pronounce that. Once again, not Vietnamese. Chilling accounts of CIA atrocities in South Vietnam, particularly in the Bin Hoa mental hospital in Saigon, have been documented. In 1966, Dr. Lloyd H. Cutter and 2 other psychiatrists were sent with an electroshock machine to the Technical Services Division of the OPS to test depatterning exercises on the brain. Utilizing the Phoenix ladder, Viet Cong prisoners were subjected to excessive shock treatments, receiving 60 shocks daily for a week. None survived, and the CIA doctors returned to the United States without results. Just senseless, needless death. This incident highlights the extreme measures taken in the name of intelligence and the tragic loss of life that resulted. In 1968, based on journalists' account, a CIA team and a doctor flew to the hospital and implanted tiny electrodes in captives' brains. By changing frequencies, they could induce defecation and vomiting. When attempts to provoke violence among captives failed, Green Berets, following CIA orders, shot the man and burned their bodies in the hospital courtyard. These actions further illustrate the lengths to which the program went in its pursuit of control and information, raising profound ethical questions about the methods employed. And so, from everything I understand, one of the things that made this program so terrible is that they had this idea of being able to come in and target very specific high-ranking officials of the Viet Cong, because this is one part that wasn't really, I guess, explained super well about or in this article. The whole point to the Phoenix program was to completely destroy the infrastructure, the political infrastructure of the Viet Cong, of the VC. So Phoenix program was not interested in, going after the soldiers. They were more interested in the resistance, the underground guerrilla movement. And I mean, for anyone familiar with military tactics or even just warfare at all, or maybe you're even not, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that, fighting an idea is probably one of the most difficult things you can do. But beating an idea out of somebody is not how you do it. That is definitely not how you fight these ideas. So, casualties and testimonies. This is a perfect opportunity. Let me pull up a video clip real quick. I should have had this ready also, but we were running a little late, so had to, make choices. Let's see here. So this actually is from the same interview or little documentary thing from the BBC, but I did clip this to be able to use at a later date. Let's see here. So At the time of the Phoenix program, the person in charge is who you see on your screen, which is William Colby. He was the man in charge of the CIA at the time. Little interesting fact about Colby. His daughter, I can't remember her name off the top of my head. She actually ended up passing away super young. She was 21, I believe, when she passed away. And from all accounts, she passed away due to her revelation that she was the daughter of William Colby, who was responsible for the deaths of upwards of 40,000 Vietnamese people under the Phoenix program, which were subjected to a lot of these tortures that we have already discussed. So one thing I want to point out, this is why I clipped this from William Colby, is because anyone who knows anything about this or who's familiar with these topics, or even have just ever read a book about any of these or anything, you understand that torture is an incredibly inefficient method for gaining intelligence. It doesn't work. When people are being tortured, they will say anything you want them to say just to get it to stop. So intelligence is a lot more finesse. It's a lot more creating, it's a lot more creating relationships and building these connections with people who are going to be your confidential informants, versus just beating the shit out of somebody to be able to get whatever information you want. It just doesn't work that way, especially if the only people you're getting are people with no information. They're not just some super hard asses. They're literally just innocent bystanders and innocent civilians that have no information, so they couldn't tell you anything anyways. But even those people will still say whatever you want them to say. They'll make up anything to get the torture to stop. Now, I wanted to illustrate this with the words of William Colby himself. So let's jump into that real quick.
The CIA had never taught brutal interrogation.
The CIA never taught brutal assassinations. Nice little Freudian slip there.
Because it's counterproductive. I learned that in World War II.
Okay, so he's already admitted that the brutal torture techniques are counterproductive to being able to get information from this. So he already knows this. Like he just said, this is what he learned in World War II.
The Nazis applied that kind of technique. All they got was either what they wanted to hear or the person died resisting them. And you're not going to get accurate information that way. Interrogation is a very subtle art of bringing along the person until he begins to tell you more and more, and then confronting him with contradictions in what he told you, with what you know from another source. And then you gradually break him down and you learn what the real case is. But that is, beating on the soles of the feet or something doesn't help you at all in that process.
Okay, so this is something that he knows. Yet, he still went ahead with the Phoenix program anyways. So, they, meaning the CIA, but specifically Colby, the man in charge of the whole program, demanding results of the operatives in the field, he is demanding results, even though he understands that the Phoenix program and this style of torture or advanced interrogation techniques is not going to work. He completely understands this, and yet he does it anyways. So the problem I see with this is that, well, I mean, besides the obvious, what this says to me is that, I mean, they're doing it for the love of it, or because they want to, because they can get away with it. Other than the fact that there's an ulterior motive, such as MKULTRA, coming in and inflicting trauma-based mind control on these people, because once we start talking about the techniques in which they inflicted the advanced interrogation techniques, sounds a lot more like MKUltra than it does a counterinsurgency program. Excuse me. So in 1970 through 1971, William Colby, Chief of Pacification in Vietnam, interesting title, testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that the Phoenix program had killed 6,187, or over 12% of the 75,000 strong Viet Cong in 1969 alone. So killed, 6,100, almost 6,200 people, 12% of the Viet Cong in 1 year alone. Days later, and mind you, Vietnam was 20 years or almost 20 years long. Of course, the Phoenix program didn't last quite that long. It did start several years into the conflict, but nonetheless, I mean, it was still 20 years long. So, and this program officially, let's see, damn mouse. Let's pull up real quick and just see how long, at least the official story says that it was available. Oh, yes. That reminds me another part of the story. So let's see. Sorry about this. Let's just be real quick. The PHOENIX. Let's see here. So Phoenix program. So just Wikipedia. Let's see. So it says here that the program, which lasted from 68 to 72. So 4 years. Let's see here. Harry G. Summers Jr., Vietnam War Almanac, University Press. Honorable Men, My Life in the CIA. What a piece of shit. So William Colby wrote a memoir, it looks like, titled Honorable Men, My Life in the CIA. Fuck you. What a piece of shit. Okay, so a retrospective and counterinsurgency program. So at the very least, the official narrative is that this program officially lasted from 1968 to 1972. So even right here in Wikipedia, it does say the program, which lasted from 1968 to 1972, was designed to identify and destroy the Viet Cong via infiltration, assassination, torture, capture, counterterrorism, and interrogation. The CIA described it as, quote, a set of programs that sought to attack and destroy the political infrastructure of the Viet Cong. The Phoenix program was premised on the idea that North Vietnamese infiltration had required local support with non-combat civilian populations, which were referred to as VC infrastructure, and political branch that had purportedly coordinated the insurgency. So, I mean, even the official story states that, that it was all about assassination, torture, capture, counterterrorism, and interrogation, or trauma-based mind control. So, back to here. So, 6,187 of, or over 12% of the 75,000 strong Viet Cong in 1969 alone. Days later, Colby reaffirmed to the Senate committee that the program had killed 20,587 Viet Cong suspects since 1968. So let's see. The program supposedly ended in 1972. So between the years of 1970 and 1971, the program's not even over yet. And he's in a Senate committee hearing. He's testifying on behalf of what the program is doing, how successful it's been, probably asking for more funding, all of these different things. And he is in here testifying that the Phoenix program had killed, by this point, 20,587 Viet Cong suspects, not confirmed VC infrastructure or the VC political arm of the VC, but suspects. And it's very appropriate that that's put in quotations as suspects. Keep that in mind. The South Vietnamese government countered with a figure of 40,994 since 1968. These statistics reveal the scale of the program's impact and the significant loss of life associated with its operations. Colby's recollection of casualties up until 1971 was as follows. This is a quote from Colby. Quote, "I believe that the figures in mid-1971 that were testified to at the time were some 28,000 had been captured, some 20,000 had been killed, and some 17,000 had actually rallied by that time. Obviously, the program has been going on since then, and those figures are larger today." So this is just within 3 years. So, I mean, that's the numbers that he gave. Let's see. So that's 28 plus 20, which is 48,000, plus the 17, which is 65,000 people, roughly, give or take. And that's what he's willing to admit to. That's absurd. That is absurd. That's what he's willing to admit to on record. So we can assume, based upon other instances of, CIA programs, that the number was probably double, triple, possibly even quadruple that. I would say maybe triple, probably triple that. So his testimony provides insight into the program's reach and its role in the broader conflict, as well as the continued controversy surrounding its legacy. According to the same release as Colby's testament, the Phoenix program was fully integrated into the South Vietnamese police forces in 1972, and all U.S. assistance to the Phoenix program through the Department of Defense subsequently ended. This transition marked the end of direct U.S. involvement, but left a lasting impact on Vietnam's security landscape, reflecting the complex legacy of the Phoenix program and its enduring influence on counterinsurgency strategies. So, this just butts up right next to Gladio, Operation Gladio. To me, I don't see very much difference, other than the fact that Gladio was more of a left behind. This was after the conflict, whereas in the Phoenix program was during the conflict. Although I would argue that it probably meshed, or it probably graduated into a Gladio type situation where the program just rolled over. But here's the thing: is this was largely happening. It was the CIA largely pulling the strings, telling people what to do. They had brought, by this point, what was special forces at the time. So Green Berets, Navy SEALs, Marine Commandos, and just like the top elite of the elite. A lot of these missions that they were doing were behind enemy lines, technically not in Vietnam. A lot of them were in Cambodia and Laos, even some in China. And a lot of these were, for lack of a better term, how do I say this without triggering the stupid YouTube algorithm, self unaliving missions. And it's so stupid I have to say that. So, I mean, we have the elite of the elite being told by the CIA what to do, how to do it. At the same time, we are also bringing in leaders from other countries and explaining to them how to do this. So this isn't just we're doing this for, X, Y, and Z. We're doing this. We're also going to teach other leaders in other countries how to do this so they can continue doing this after the fact. So even though it ended, it didn't end. You can't tell me that the South Vietnamese just stopped employing these tactics afterwards. Project X, the expansion of counterinsurgency in the Phoenix program, the birth of Project X. While the U.S. was fighting the Viet Cong in Vietnam, U.S. officials understood that more needed to be done to combat the perceived threat of communism. It's always, the justification for this. To achieve this, counterinsurgency operations around the world were bolstered and efforts were increased. This led to the creation of the Latin American prototype of the Phoenix program. Imagine that. Known as Project X, which we will be going to as we dive deeper into the Phoenix program over the next several weeks, and we keep covering that. In case you haven't figured out by now, this is going to be an ongoing series where we deep dive into all of this, the specifics, how it's carried over, where it went after that, and how it affects us today. So make sure and hit the subscribe, hit the follow, all of those things, hit the like, leave comments, all of these things so you make sure and catch all of the upcoming connections because we will be covering this for several weeks. Let's see. So this led to the creation of the Latin American prototype of the Phoenix program. Once again, sounds just like Gladio. Known as Project X. Although one could argue it is merely an extension of the Vietnamese Phoenix program, it is rather a synthesis and revision of techniques and practices used in Vietnam. Project X began sometime in 1965 through 1966 and existed as a confidential Pentagon memo states, quote, to develop an exportable foreign intelligence package to provide counterinsurgency techniques learned in Vietnam to Latin American countries. Just in time for Jonestown. Public revelation and controversy, of course, because this did hit the public at some point. This wasn't hidden forever. The American public first became aware of Project X and its influence in Latin America in 1970, when an OPS advising officer, Dan Mitrone, was executed by Tumparo rebels in Uruguay. It was revealed by a Cuban double agent that Mitrone, a father of 9, was a mastermind of torture and its dissemination through his role in the OPS in Uruguay. His motto was, reportedly, quote, the right pain in the right place at the right time. And he believed that the premature death during torture meant that the technique had failed. So this sick bastard not only was into torture, it sounds like he enjoyed it, which, I mean, you would have to be, right? To do this, you would have to be into this. But this guy, not only is he into it, but, you know, if somebody dies, he's like, ah, shit, this failed. Like, we just got to be better torturers next time. We've just got to torture better. Which subsequently is actually exactly what happened. By this point, CIA doctors were actually being hired. Let's see, I don't have the book with me in here. We will be covering this, though. There's another book I'm currently in the middle of, but it's all about CIA doctors and their contribution to the torture program, which is basically Gladio, Condor, Phoenix, all of these other birds. Birds of a feather flock together. Anyways, it talks about how doctors would basically not only streamline the torture, but they would come up with new versions of torture. That way they could optimize it, basically. So they would come in and be able to find out how far that they could push the human body before the person was at risk of dying. So doctors were brought in to not only devise new torture methods, but also the effects of the torture on the human body. So that way people could figure out how much time they could go through this. And they really have perfected it, especially at this point, where they will torture you, and the whole point of it is dragging it out as long as they possibly can. In fact, let's see if I can bring this up. I didn't even think about bringing this up, but if I can find this is going to be, this is going to be awesome. Let's see. Let's see. Whoop. I think this is it. No, he was in front of Congress. Let's see here. Just wanted to highlight. Let's see here. So I'm looking for a speech that President Trump gave. This was actually in his first term. Let's see. I found the full speech, but let's see. I don't need the full speech. It's an hour and 40 minutes long. We ain't got that time. However, I mean, this does apply to things going on recently, because he has mentioned that he does plan on, in fact, we'll just pull this up real quick. Might as well. Let's see. Pause that real quick. Let's see here. So let's listen to what President Trump has to say about this.
Also signing an executive order to instruct the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security to begin preparing the 30,000-person migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay. Most people don't even know about it. We have 30,000 beds.
30 fucking thousand
in Guantanamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people. Some of them are so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them, because we don't want them coming back. So we're going to send them out to Guantanamo. This will double our capacity.
Now, okay, just for the record, just to put this out there, I'm not like some bleeding heart liberal that thinks, oh, we can't, detain illegals, or, that's a whole different discussion. That what's shocking to me about this is because they're going to Guantanamo. Guantanamo, for anyone who doesn't know, is basically a torture facility. And although I don't want these people running our streets, I'm fine with their deportation. I don't think that we should turn around and torture them. Waterboarding, I mean, once they're captured, I mean, okay, I don't know what the right answer is, but I can confidently say that torturing them, or at least bringing them to a torture facility that, they're going to have advanced interrogation techniques thrust upon them, I don't think is, the right answer either. So just wanted to bring that up. I'm not saying that we shouldn't deport these people. I definitely don't want like super crazy violent illegals out on our streets, or even Americans. I don't want crazy violent Americans on our streets either. But just the fact that 30,000 to Guantanamo is that's an intense number. That is an intense number.
Capacity immediately, right? And tough. That's a tough place to get out of. Today's signings bring us one step closer to eradicating the scourge of migrant crime in our communities once and for all. And it was just it's just an unforced error that we even have to be doing this. Now we need Congress to provide full funding for the complete and total restoration of our sovereign borders, as well as financial support to remove record numbers of illegal aliens. And these are illegal alien killers, criminals at levels that nobody's ever seen before.
Okay. That's kind of getting into the weeds. That's not what we're here for. Let's see. Let me just pull up the full speech of the one I'm thinking about. Actually, let's see. That was the joint session of Congress. This was back in his first term. Let's see. If I can't find it, we're just going to move on. But this was incredibly shocking when I first heard it. Yes, I think I did find it. Hopefully it's just the speech. Let me make sure that. Okay, come on. Let me pull this up real quick. Okay, so this was in his first term. And this was right when he signed an order to keep Guantanamo Bay open. Let's see. Hopefully this is just the speech itself. So this is only 2 minutes and 25 seconds. We'll make our way through it.
Terrorists who do things like place bombs in civilian hospitals are evil. When possible, we have no choice but to annihilate them. When necessary, we must be able to detain and question them. But we must be clear. Terrorists are not merely criminals. They are unlawful enemy combatants.
Is it just me, or does Mike Pence's face just piss anyone else off? He doesn't. Okay, sit down.
And when captured overseas, they should be treated like the terrorists they are. In the past, we have foolishly released hundreds and hundreds of
This is it right here.
Only to meet them again on the battlefield, including the ISIS leader, al-Baghdadi, who we captured, who we had, who we released. So today, I'm keeping another promise. I just signed, prior to walking in, an order directing Secretary Mattis, who is doing a great job. Thank you.
What do you do?
"9/11."
to re-examine our military detention policy and to keep open the detention facilities in Guantanamo Bay.
"9/11.
I am asking Congress to ensure that in the fight against ISIS and Al-Qaeda, we continue to have all necessary power to detain terrorists wherever we chase them down."
Okay, so that was to me, that was incredibly shocking when I first saw that. It's just wild to me that so many people were so happy about keeping this open. As far as closing it out, I don't know how I feel about that. What I am 100% sure of is that torture it's the one of the largest human rights abuses, and we just let it happen. Not only let it happen, but as you can see, the entire chamber was cheering for that shit. I mean, that's disgusting. There's interviews you can go find of former Guantanamo Bay prisoners that describe their time there, and not any of that sounds amazing. And I'm not even quite sure what the benefit of keeping it open is. Like, I'm not sure. Like, you heard William Colby. For anyone who's tuning in now, they played a clip of William Colby, CIA director at the time, discussing how torture does not work. It is not. It's not beneficial. It doesn't work. So I don't understand exactly what is happening. Anyways, let's get back into it before we get too far into the weeds, as if we already haven't. So, let's read that quote again. His motto was reportedly, "The right pain in the right place at the right time," which is mind-blowing to me. And he believed that premature death during torture meant that the technique had failed. Congressional investigation and aftermath. Starting in 1971, a congressional investigation into the OPS brought to light claims that it was proliferating torture manuals, programs, and training around the world. By 1975, Congress cut funding for all police and prison training abroad, effectively abolishing the Office of Public Safety. What an odd name, Oh, the Office of Public Safety, and they will torture your ass to death. However, Congress never investigated the primary source of this information and training. Imagine that, which was the CIA. The CIA escaped reform and scrutiny and had already shifted its main arm of torture dissemination to the Army's Military Advisor Program, which had the same reach as the OPS did. So this is exactly what the CIA does. They'll turn around, they'll get busted, or something will get found out, and then all of a sudden they'll just switch the program. They'll just change who is in charge. They'll keep the same structure, but they'll just send it off somewhere else, which is exactly what they did with MKUltra. Now, mind you, at the time of the Phoenix program, the official time in which this was happening, so 68 to 72, what was also happening at that time? MKUltra, which was using the exact same tactics. So this is exactly what they were studying or researching, I guess, at the time. Let's see here. See, I don't need that. Don't need that. Don't need that. Let's see. So, sorry, just cleaning up a few things here, making sure everything's still efficient. In the meantime, if you haven't already, go ahead, hit the subscribe, hit the like, follow, all of these things. We will be covering the Phoenix program and all of the fallout after that. So let's see here. So I believe we have everything cleaned up in the meantime. Okay. So the continued influence and exposure. The dissemination of such content came to a halt under President Jimmy Carter's humanist administration. I guess. I don't want to give him any credit. He was a piece of shit too. During which he put a stop to all covert actions by the CIA and other agencies. Sort of. I mean, at least officially. But we all know how that works. They were still doing these things, just, they just got more secret and they got more compartmentalized, and it was more on a needed to know basis. So he didn't really stop it, but sure, go ahead. Take credit for that. I mean, good for you, Jimmy Carter, you fucking peanut farmer. Let's see. During which he put a stop to all covert actions by the CIA and other agencies. Latin America remained under the radar regarding CIA-taught torture until 1988. Go figure. Iran-Contra, that era. When a New York Times expose highlighted CIA-taught torture in Honduras under the command of Colonel Gustavo Alvarez Martinez. The correlation between the CIA and the Honduran government's torture practices lies in almost word-for-word similarities between the QBARC interrogation manual produced in the 1960s as a result of MKULTRA by the CIA and the Honduran Human Resource Manual drafted in 1983. Okay, so Shadows of Control, the Phoenix program in Iran. The 1953 coup and establishment of control. In 1953, the CIA, in collaboration with Israeli Mossad. Wait, hold on. In collaboration with, orchestrated a coup in Iran to reinstate the pro-Western Shara, I believe. I don't know. Over the next 25 years, the CIA played a critical role in maintaining his control. A pivotal moment came in 1959 when the CIA was involved in the reorganization of the Iranian secret police. They were instrumental in the formation of the SAVAK, not sure, the most brutal of the secret police squads, training the unit and its interrogators using Nazi torture techniques inherited through Operation Paperclip directly after World War II. The role of the CIA in SAVAK's brutality, which, once again, CIA taught all of these guys how to do these things. It's just what we did. We exported our knowledge of torture, which I was just thinking about this earlier today is, so if the CIA is not only involved in the torture, learning the torture, organizing the torture, optimizing the torture, teaching the torture to all of these other countries and their secret police, their intelligence agencies, spreading the use of torture all throughout the fucking world, then who do you think the FBI learned it from? Because you can't tell me that the FBI just taught themselves. They learned it from the CIA. I guarantee it. So Jesse Leaf, a former CIA analyst, recalled, quote, "Although no Americans particularly participated in the torture bullshit, family who were there were seeing the rooms and being told of torture. And I know the torture rooms were all toured and paid for by the USA, which means your fucking tax dollars." Well, if you were alive back then. Otherwise, I mean, our tax dollars are going to things like this today. We know that. It is. This statement highlights the CIA's clear dissemination of not only torture techniques, but also the provision of the entire torture rooms and funds to support such practices. In the 1970s, as opposition to Shahs grew, the Savak, whatever, intensified its cruel treatment and torture of dissidents. The Shah's justification and the cycle of repression. In an interview with Le Monde, the Shah stated, quote, why should we not employ the same methods as the Europeans? We have learned sophisticated methods of torture from you. You use psychological methods to extract the truth. We do the same. The widespread use of torture by Shah's regime ultimately contributed to his own demise. Student protesters continued to dissent and protest, leading to more arrests and torture by Savak. The cycle resulted in the Iranian government holding over 50,000 political prisoners by the late 1970s. By 1979, the Islamist movement successfully overthrew the Shah and the pro-Western Iranian government by relying on arrest, torture, and the forced will of the Iranian people. The Shah inadvertently orchestrated his own downfall. The CIA crafted torture intended to maintain peace and suppress dissent, ultimately fractured the legitimate and reception of the Shah and his government, paving the way for the revolution that followed. Nation building by the CIA in the Middle East. Who knew? And now, all of a sudden, somebody over, in the Middle East definitely wants us to go to war with Iran. I mean, we already overthrew their government and installed, who we were told to, or I guess who we wanted to. But it's just really interesting that, all of a sudden somebody wants us to go to war with Iran and has been wanting us to go to war for a long time. Wonder who that may be. So let's see here. The Phoenix Program and Theatrical Torture, the Philippines under Marcos. Let's see. Before we get into that, I am going to divert just a little bit, and we are going to go back to this documentary real quick.
By suppressing it so that no one would talk to me about it, I could pretend I had stopped it or maybe curtailed it, and proceeded to work with this monster for the next 2 years on a very intimate basis.
44 provincial interrogation centers, known as PICs, were designed and built by the CIA.
Trước lúc tôi bị bắt á, thì tôi là ủy viên tiểu ban giáo dục của phân khu.
At the time of my arrest, I was a member of the Education Committee for the National Liberation Front in Long An. When they tortured me, the Americans stood on one side and talked to my torturers. They used electric shock. First they attached a peg to my ear, then my lower lip, then my tongue, then my nipples. They had a device like a telephone set which had a gauge on it with markings from 1 to 9. When they turned it from 1 to 8, we were still conscious but felt pain. When they used 9, we became unconscious. Then they hit my hands until they were all swollen like bananas. You couldn't close your fingers. Then they used a pair of pincers to pull my nails out and in, one nail at a time. I thought my fingers were going to drop off. When they pulled your nails, you felt a pain in your head. It was terrible. It took 10 years for my nails to grow back. Still, I told them nothing.
None of the PICs worked. We never got interrogation reports out of the PICs. Others said, I don't know. They denied everything. In fact, I never found one who was ever identified as a Class A VC from a village. I never found one in any of the pics. I went to all of the pics, Military Region 3. Useless. Totally useless.
After my arrest, they put me in a helicopter and took me to the interrogation center. There were 2 Americans and 1 Vietnamese there. I was not a VC, I knew nothing. I was just a woman. They poured soapy water down my throat until I felt I was drowning. Then they poked me with a dagger, and they kicked me on both sides of the ribs. They beat me until I could have children no more. I hate the Americans. It's because of the Phoenix program that I have become an invalid. I hate them very much.
Torture as instrument of the Phoenix program, I'm sure it occurred, and I can tell you that the South Vietnamese were totally unforgiving of their adversaries, just as the communists were unforgiving of the South Vietnamese.
So that is one thing I want to bring up real quick, is this was by no means one-sided. This is something to keep in mind. The Americans were not the only ones doing this. Specifically, I am just focusing on the Americans due to its connection to MKUltra, topic that we regularly cover here on the channel. But by no means were, the North Vietnamese or even the South Vietnamese innocent in this. I mean, this was war. Everyone's hands gets bloody in war. So by no means am I excusing them or trying to downplay them or trying to ignore that by any means. This was happening to American GIs as well. So this is, not an excuse for them by any means. We just happen to be focusing on what the CIA, specifically Special Forces, and other soldiers did to the Vietnamese, because this ties into things that are happening now, which is what we will be getting into at a later date.
Vietnamese political operatives whom they captured. The agency knew about this, and the agency let the South Vietnamese government torture when it served a particular purpose. It's terrible to say, but there's no question that it happened. I saw the results of this policy of acquiescence.
CIA had never taught brutal interrogation.
And this is, for anyone who didn't see it, we are going to just replay this real quick, just because William Colby, the, like it says here, head of the Phoenix program from 68 to 71, also the director of the CIA. I do think it's important to bring this up. It's important to focus on this, just because he understands that torture does not work for the purpose of interrogation, of gaining information. And mind you, this was not being used on the targets that they wanted to.
Because it's counterproductive. I learned that in World War II. When the
why
Nazis
do it?
applied that kind of technique, all they got was either what they wanted to hear or the person
I'll tell you why do it, because you're a sick bastard that likes it.
died resisting them. And you're not going to get accurate information that way. Interrogation is a very subtle art of bringing along the person until he begins to tell you more and more, and then confronting him with contradictions in what he told you, with what you know from another source. And then you gradually break him down and you learn what the real case is. But that is, beating on the soles of the feet or something doesn't help you at all in that process.
Con Son, Vietnam's Devil's Island. Built originally by the French and later enlarged with American help, this was Vietnam's most brutal and secure prison complex. It contained...
I mean, within all fairness, that doesn't look any different than any American prison. So Doesn't make it right, but it looks like an American prison, maybe without, a few amenities, I guess. A toilet, maybe running water. Looks just like an American prison.
The notorious tiger cages. Cells measuring no more than 9 feet by 5, each held 3 prisoners in appalling conditions. Returning to the island for the first time since their captivity are 2 Vietnamese who were caught in the Phoenix program.
As I walk around this place today, I remember the cruelty and barbarity of the enemy. I still refuse to live under the same skies as them. By and large, we knew the Phoenix program was a dangerous one. They wanted to extract information from those arrested to hit back at the revolution. That was the intention of the Americans in order to win the war, to isolate the people from the Liberation Front, or more precisely, to isolate the people from the Communist Party. For the front was also the Communist Party.
I had done nothing wrong, so it was hard to imagine life could turn out to be like this. I could have accepted it if I were a Viet Cong cadre, but I was only an ordinary citizen, a truck driver. We often told each other that we had fallen into hell on earth. I can conclude that because of the Phoenix program, I, who had not been a Viet Cong cadre, turned into a man who actively participated in Viet Cong affairs.
The enormous volume of information collected by the CIA and other branches of intelligence created a dependence upon statistics. Increasingly, unrealistic quotas were set for numbers to be captured and killed.
The agency was lying in one case, and all these murders were going on in another case. And as my ideological house of cards was crumbling, Colby, as head of cords, came out to the province. And he sat there with his notebook saying, well, how many assassinations have we conducted? How many people have we arrested? How many firefights have we generated? How much this, that? And I looked at him and I said, hey, you dumb, blind son of a bitch. Why don't you open your eyes and see? Do you believe all these statistics that you're reading? Do you believe all of these things that you're saying? How can you not comprehend reality?
Yes, they do believe them, by the way. These people do believe that they are doing the right thing. You have to. You absolutely have to. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to do your job. And that's part of being in these intelligence communities, is that you have to buy into the propaganda, and you have to not question it, and you have to not question the cult leader. So yes, they do believe it, and they do believe in what they're doing. So let's get back to the article. So the Phoenix program and theatrical torture, the Philippines under Marcos. The regime of Ferdinand Marcos from 1972 to 1986, the Philippines under President Ferdinand Marcos became a notorious example of a regime employing CIA-influenced torture techniques. Marcos, a ruthless autocrat, utilized torture as a central tool to maintain his grip on power. The Filipino approach to torture was notably theatrical, with torturers assuming the role of grand inquisitors, presenting themselves as omnipotent forces of salvation. This dramatized method not only aimed to extract confessions, but also to install a pervasive sense of fear and submission within society. Now, I guess if you're running torture, psychological torture, thinking that you're going to be tortured, thinking that you're going to have great pain inflicted on you, I think that if it were going to work, which once again it doesn't, but if it were going to work, that would probably be more efficient than actually committing the torture itself. However, it doesn't work once again. Psychological manipulation. In this cruel drama, victims were made to feel utterly powerless, led to believe that confessing to crimes, whether real or fabricated, was their only path to salvation, which this is something that does actually happen under communist regimes. This is what happened in Cambodia at the time of, when all the millions of people were being slaughtered in the killing fields. This is actually what would happen, is that you would have to rat, or you would have to confess against 5 people. If you were captured and suspected of being against the regime, you would have to then confess crimes of 5 other people to then be released and considered safe, although you were never really considered safe because you could be picked up again and again and again. So this is pretty common amongst dictatorships. The language used by torturers was key to this psychological manipulation. Phrases like, "You leave me no choice," "because you choose not to cooperate," and "you are just making it worse for yourself," shifted the blame onto the victim, reinforcing their feelings of hopelessness. This method of psychological manipulation had profound effects, causing victims to view their tormentors as omnipotent forces, breaking their spirits and instilling fear throughout the broader society. And let me tell you, that's not a good society to live in, is when everything is ran off of fear. The torture of Father Edgardo Canglon, I'm not sure. A Catholic priest became a target of government torture amid rumors that the Catholic Church was harboring communists. Well, shouldn't have hit those damn commies. Just kidding. Over 2 months, he endured not only minor physical abuse, such as punches and kicks, but also relentless verbal degradation concerning his sexuality, past, and his faith. The psychological torment continued until he succumbed to pressure, naming other church officials as communist agents. His 25-page memoir exposed the theatrical methods of his torturers, revealing striking parallels with the CIA's QBARC manual. These similarities suggested CIA involvement in the Philippines torture program, highlighting a broader strategy of psychological manipulation. And why wouldn't the CIA be involved? They've been involved everywhere else at this point. Collective trauma, the practice of salvaging. A chilling aspect of government repression in the Philippines was the public display of tortured bodies, a practice known as salvaging. This tactic extended trauma beyond individual victims to the entire society. Passers-by became unwilling participants in the spectacle, forced to confront the gruesome consequences of governmental and societal actions. This practice led to the emergence of salvaging in the Filipino-American dialect, reflecting the grim reality of extrajudicial killings. Such as public displays served as a constant reminder of the regime's power and the fragility of individual safety, embedding fear and compliance within the social fabric. Parallels to modern society. Contemporary America echoes the normalization of violence in the Philippines. As police frequently kill unarmed individuals, the hypothetical adoption of the euphemistic language like cleanup to describe these acts underscores the deep-seated trauma and desensitization within society. For instance, the phrase, New York police cleaned up 3 men today, suspected of nothing, illustrates how such practices become embedded in societal consciousness. This collective trauma is challenging to address and even harder to eradicate, as it affects individuals in deeply personal ways, leaving lasting scars on the social fabric, which not only happens in the Philippines. I think for anyone paying attention, this happens here. It happens every day. I mean, this is what the news is. It's trauma-based mind control on a mass scale. As far as mind control, you have 2 forms of control. You have mass control and you have individual control. Well, this sort of parallel that takes place in other countries, this also happens here in the United States. It's the news, it's the media. That is a form of mass control. The Colonel and the Ram. Following the fall of Saigon in 1975, the CIA intensified the counterinsurgency operations in Asia. Of course they did. This is where I believe Operation Gladio would come into effect, implementing programs and techniques in the Philippines, a former colony and ally. CIA involvement traces back to 1978, when Human Rights Newsletter reported that Lieutenant Colonel Ronaldo Abadilla, a top torturer for President Marcos, was studying at the Command and General Staff School in Kansas. What the fuck? What? Another newsletter claimed that Abadilla's protege, Rodolfo Aguinaldo, was also set to study under the CIA in the United States. Many of the torturers in the Philippines were young graduates from the Philippine Military Academy. This created significant implications for both the government and society, leading to destabilization. These empowered young officers tortured anyone, including priests, journalists, politicians, and even military officials, viewing society through a distorted lens. Their training reinforced the idea that anyone could be an enemy, granting them a sense of authority and omnipotence. This mentality led to the formation of the reform of the Armed Forces Movement, or RAM, founded by some of these officers. RAM played a pivotal role in the destabilizing coups of the 1980s, further contributing to the country's political turmoil. Torture backfires on Marcos. By instituting torture, Marcos, like Sa, played a key part in his own demise. The very forces he empowered to maintain control eventually turned against him. The coups led by RAM destabilized the country and eventually spurred a guerrilla-like campaign against the government by underground RAM forces, which included terror bombings and shootings. Marcos relied heavily on CIA-crafted and disseminated torture techniques, which ultimately cost him the overall stability of his regime. The omnipotent role he prescribed to young officers allowed them to see through the thin veil of civil society, leading them to violently exert their will on it, just as they had done to countless individuals. The legacy of torture in the Philippines under Marcos illustrates the profound impact of psychological and physical violence on both individuals and society. The involvement of external forces like the CIA further complicated the dynamics, embedding a culture of fear and compliance that had lasting repercussions. The eventual backlash from within the military highlighted the inherent instability of a regime built on such foundations, serving as a cautionary tale to the destructive power of state-sanctioned violence. The theatrical nature of the torture, coupled with its psychological manipulation, left deep scars that continue to resonate with the collective memory of the nation. The eagle extinguished. So this is, it says it was unissued Phoenix program patch, but this was actually issued to the locals in Vietnam. I don't know how widely it was, but they do exist. They are out there. Let's see here. Okay, just making sure everything else is still going. So we are good. The proliferation of the Phoenix program during the Vietnam conflict not only led to the creation of CIA-crafted torture programs like Project X, but also contributed to the deterioration of American allied governments abroad. This was particularly evident in Iran before 1979, and the Philippines in the 1980s, where state terrorism and abuse became rampant. The CIA, initially using the Office of Public Safety and wartime channels in Vietnam, successfully disseminated torture techniques derived from MKUltra findings and Nazi methods from World War II. The Phoenix program, with its intricate intelligence network, ensured no one was safe from its reach. This led to Project X, an offshoot that spread to over 10 Latin American countries. Intentionally, I believe. By training personnel from allied nations such as Iran and the Philippines, CIA-crafted torture found a global foothold. However, instead of stabilizing these regimes, it further unraveled them. In Iran, a vicious cycle emerged. Dissidents led to brutal torture, which in turn fueled more dissidents, escalating until revolution erupted. The Shah's regime, reliant on CIA-influenced torture, ultimately collapsed under the weight of its own repression, which is the game that the CIA plays. This is what they do. So, to get their jollies off, teaching all of these things. They get to refine their process. They get to make the process much better. And then they ultimately get to play nation building. This is all what they want. This is all what they want. In the Philippines, the adoption of... Oh, wait. Actually, no, we didn't read that. So in the Philippines, the adoption of CIA torture techniques created a radical military echelon that plagued the nation for nearly a decade. I would argue we're still dealing with ours. By young officers... the formation of the Reform the Armed Forces Movement, or RAM, by young officers trained and emboldened by these methods, led to destabilizing coups in the 1980s. This exclusionary military elite tormented daily life, further destabilizing the government and society, which is exactly what they want, which is exactly what's happening now. The legacy of these programs highlighted the destructive consequences of state-sanctioned violence. Instead of securing regimes, the implementation of such brutal tactics only expedited their downfall, underscoring the inherent instability and ethical failures of using torture as a tool of governance. And that is the end of this article. So, for anyone who is interested, the CIA's Phoenix program, Mercy of the Wicked. Wonderful. Of course, there is a bunch of other information that we didn't cover, or that wasn't covered necessarily in this. So there are some other things that we are going to cover. We're not quite done yet, even though this was the end of this article. This was the main focus. Let's see here. Give me just one sec. I got to pull up the other article. We're not going to get too much into this other article. We don't have the time for it today. But once again, make sure and hit the like, follow, subscribe, all of these things, because we will be covering this more in the future. And after seeing this, what I'm about to bring up, you're definitely going to want to stick around for what we will be covering in the future. Things will get definitely more crazy. Let's see here. Sorry. Just forgot where I put it, but let's see. Aha, found it. Let's see. Give me just one sec. Okay, so we are going to cover another article real quick. Let's see. Well, actually, it's going to be two real quick, and then we'll get out of here. So one I want to bring up real quick. It's, I believe, 15 facts about torture. And this comes from the Center for Victims of Torture. So the 15 facts about torture, which we probably should have started with this in hindsight, but, it is what it is. Fact number 1. The torture report is the story of the CIA torture program told through the CIA's own records, which the public was never meant to see. Fact number 2. Every vote in Congress related to the investigation into the CIA torture program was bipartisan. I don't know about that. That seems, I'll take their word for it. Fact 3. Enhanced interrogation was torture, and the CIA knew it. Well, yeah, of course they did. Fact number 4. The CIA torture program caused profound and, in numerous cases, permanent psychological and physical harm to its victims. That was the point. Fact number 5. Torture did not work. Fact number 6. The CIA torture program was never legal. Fact number 7. The CIA torture program was unprofessional and inept. Fact number 8. The CIA torture program caused strategic damage to the United States and jeopardized U.S. national security. Such precious national security that they claim all the time to care about, which is why they can't release documents, which is why they do all these other terrible things. It did put it in jeopardy. Fact number 9. The CIA torture program was wasteful. Although I find maybe we should look into this more later in another episode, because I am wondering why they're using past tense. CIA torture program still going, maybe not in its current iteration that we discovered in the Middle East when we were still in Afghanistan. But it's still going. I think we've we've covered that. Anyone who knows MKUltra knows that's still going, still carried on after 73. So why wouldn't this be? So it's just a matter of time before it gets exposed again. Fact number 10, the CIA went to extraordinary lengths to cover up the torture program's futility and brutality, including repeated misrepresentations to senior executive branch officials, Congress, and the public. Fact 11, the CIA torture program has prevented justice for the families of those killed during the September 11th, 2001 attacks. Fact 12, architects and operators of the CIA torture program have risen to prestigious positions in government, the private sector, the federal judiciary, and academia. Fact number 13, almost nobody in the executive branch has read a single word of the torture report, and the report's fate remains uncertain. Fact number 14, retired military leaders, former interrogators, medical professionals, faith leaders, families of those who died on 9/11, and many others from across the political spectrum are opposed to torture. Fact 15, the next president can do a lot to further truth, justice, and accountability for CIA torture, but that's not going to happen. That is definitely not going to happen. The next president that we are dealing with now, as we showed earlier in the show, actually just, signed a bill in his first term to keep it open, or to keep Guantanamo open. And outside of that, he's also furthered torture techniques, torture programs. In fact, let me see if I can pull this up real quick. This would be really interesting if I could find this. If not, I will find this at some point and post it on X. Let's see. Let's see. Waterboarding. Oh, geez, that was easy. Okay, so I'm actually going to clip this anyways and end up sharing it. But let's watch President Trump's comment regarding waterboarding and what his feelings are regarding this.
We're weak. We're ineffective. During one of the debates, they asked Lying Ted about waterboarding. And he didn't want to answer because it was it was a question. What do you think about waterboarding? And he didn't want to get involved because he was afraid it wasn't politically correct. And he gave a nothing answer, a weak, pathetic answer like we always give. They asked me, what do you think about waterboarding, Mr. Trump? I said, I love it. I love it. I think it's great. And I said, the only thing is we should make it much tougher than waterboarding. And if you don't think it works, folks, you're wrong. But there are laws. We have laws that we have to abide by. So I say we're going to have to strengthen the laws and toughen up the laws, and we're going to have to make ourselves tougher. Because they can...
We all know what that means.
They can drown people in steel cages, right? They can put people in steel cages by 25 and 50 people and drop them in the water and pull them up an hour later, and we can't waterboard. How stupid are we? How stupid are we?
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC.
Ah, shut up, Chris Hayes. Nobody gives a shit what you have to say. Let's see. So, let's see right here. Sorry, just pulling up the next. Okay, so we're going to head over to the Guardian. This is a older article, but this is what we're going to finish up on. And this is also what we're going to be covering later on. But is this still going on? Is this happening in our own backyard? Well, I would like to inform everyone that 10 years ago, The Guardian did cover this, that there was a CIA torture black site in Chicago that disappeared. Chicago police detain Americans at abuse-laden black site. Exclusive Secret interrogation facility reveals aspect of war on terror in U.S. Quote, they disappeared us. Protester details 17-hour shackling without basic rights. Accounts describe police brutality, missing 15-year-old and one man's death. So granted, this was 10 years ago. But you can't tell me it's not happening now. Let's go see what they have to say about this.
This old warehouse on Chicago's west side is not a typical police facility. It's called Homan Square. Lawyers and criminologists describe it as Chicago's equivalent of a CIA black site.
When you go in, nobody knows what happened to you. It's almost like they throw a black bag over your head and make you disappear for a day or two. And just, they're interrogation facilities.
In May 2012, Brian Jacob Church traveled to Chicago to protest the NATO summit. Police arrested him on suspicion of terrorism charges, but no one knew where he was taken.
When they first arrested us, they took us to this building. We were never booked or we were never processed. I was in Homan Square for about 17 hours, handcuffed to a bench before I was actually
I'm just saying, maybe this is kind of fucked up to say, but this kid or this guy does not look like he could handle himself in jail or prison. Not that really too many people could handle themselves in a CIA or police torture facility or interrogation unit. But this poor guy does not look like he can handle himself very well.
Finally allowed to see an attorney.
The right to remain silent is fundamental in criminal justice. So is access to a lawyer. At Homan Square, Church says you get neither. With his lawyers unable even to find him, no one could enforce his rights.
I had essentially figured, all right, well, they disappeared us, and so we're probably never going to see the light of day again.
Homan Square isn't obviously a police facility, but there are cop vehicles parked outside. Anti-gang, anti-vice, and other special units operate inside, where the public is barred from seeing what goes on.
So essentially, the bench was about this wide, and at the back, it had a bar that came across like this. They wouldn't unhandcuff us to sleep. So when I slept with like my hand cuffed to the bar, and I was kind of slept like this. All of our ankles were handcuffed together as well. I asked them to make a phone call. I asked, to talk to my lawyers. And again, they pointed at the phone number and was like, oh, you're not getting any phone calls from here. And they're like, just tell us what we want to know and you can go home.
Lawyers eventually found Church through a tip-off from Chicago politicos. After approximately 20 hours inside Homan Square, he was taken to an actual police precinct.
Homan Square is definitely an unusual place. It brings to mind the interrogation facilities that they use in the Middle East. That's essentially what this place, Homan Square, is. It's a domestic black site.
So, this has happened on U.S. soil. This is happening on U.S. soil. This has continued happening. It will continue happening. As you saw, President Trump's comments on this, he loves waterboarding. He thinks it should be tougher. And I mean, this should strike fear into the hearts of anyone watching this, as anyone can be deemed a terrorist. And due to the fallout of what happened after 9/11, any one of us could be named a terrorist, and then that's it. Let's see. I do have, maybe some of you remember, there was a DHS memo that was released. Let's see. I'm trying to see if I can find it. It was who DHS considers to be a domestic terrorist. Anybody that, flew the Don't Tread on Me flag. Libertarians were named in this, which, is insane to me. Absolutely insane. But the point is that any one of us could be named a domestic terrorist, and all of a sudden, how long before we end up in one of these domestic black sites that could be all over the country. And then once you get black bagged and put into one of these stations, I mean, you have no access to a lawyer. You have no access to any of your rights. I mean, it's not like we really have them on the outside of these facilities anyways. But Operation Phoenix was one of the first dry runs of this actually happening. And in my opinion, it has not stopped since. Yeah, it's not called Phoenix anymore. It's called something else at this point. But all you have to do is take a look at the Patriot Act, take a look at any of these other things to be able to see that they have set this up against us in such a profound way that one wrong step and we are all fucked. And the things that we would experience in such facilities would be trauma-based mind control. Trauma-based mind control that was, studied and instituted through programs like MKUltra, MK Delta, MK Search, MK Naomi, all of the MK programs and everything else. And so this is why I'm focusing on Project Phoenix, Program Phoenix, whatever, Phoenix program, however you want to call it. This is something incredibly important. I think it still affects us daily, and it's going to keep affecting us. And it's just right below the surface. So I implore all of you who are watching to make sure and hit the follow, hit the share button, subscribe, retweet, or reshare all of these things. Make sure and follow me on YouTube, Rumble. You can find me on Odyssey, BitChute, all of these places. Make sure and stay in contact because we will be deep diving a lot more into the Phoenix program to get more into this. We will be covering a lot more like Homeland Square facility in Chicago. And this is just, mind you, one place out of many. So please make sure, subscribe, follow, hit the like, share, all of these things. This is incredibly important, and we will be getting much deeper into this alongside MKUltra, mind control, behavior modification programs, all of these different things that are incredibly affecting us. But on that note, I think we're going to get out of here today. We're almost at the 2-hour mark. And one thing I want to say is that this is the price we pay to live in a civilized society. Okay, that was a bit twisted. I'm sorry. One thing I wanted to bring up real quick, one of our viewers had commented, and I would just like to say thank you for commenting so much, and very much you are welcome. Like I said, I will be covering more of this material, so please hit the follow, like, subscribe, all of those good things. We will be getting out of here. Thank you so much for joining on this newer episode of Rise to Liberty podcast. I am looking at adding a show title for a lot of these things, but as of right now, it's still Rise to Liberty. It's still going to be covered under all of this. Other than that, I think we are out of here for today. So I guess the only thing I can leave you guys with is stay aware, keep your head on a swivel. There is going to be more of this coming. So I guess until then, stay free, my friends.